Shinje doze me na me da be, shinje sola banja me ge le, dane me ge sem la dam ja so, de je me ba se je. Da je yo so da bra shinje lo, shinje.
I think it is okay to begin, and I will continue where I left off. Now, can you hear me? Now, during this age of philosophy, there was a wrong view or an anti-religion, whatever you call it. There's a very extreme tradition that arose. Now, the way this tradition developed is under dispute. Its the researchers do not agree on the sources. It is also very difficult to say whether the Charvaka appeared before Buddhism or after Buddhism. The reason is because there's no source or manuscript that decisively indicates where it appeared. But it's a very combative school, and they tried to disrupt things. And the time when the disruptions happened was during the time that Buddhism was already spreading. So this is probably during the time of the spread of original Buddhism. Now, who is it who began this tradition, who founded this tradition? The Buddhist texts say that the initial founder of this was a sage named the Eye of the World. However, the non-Buddhists themselves the non-Buddhists do not explain it in this way. The way they describe it is there is a teacher named Devaguru, the third guru of the gods. And they have a rather nice way of explaining it. The way they say this is that he went to Devaguru went to the land of the asuras, the demigods, and and he taught them the wrong views in order to overcome their bounty and pleasures. But this is kind of a story that's kind of mixed in with myth, and so whether it's actually a true story is a different matter. And also, what the non-Buddhists say is that the Charvaka, that the founder of the school was also known by the Devaguru, was also named the name Brihaspati. So whether you call him Brihaspati or Gurudeva, among the non-Buddhists call him the name of the Devaguru, and that is a very well-known name for him. There's also another name for the school, which is called the hedonist school. Because the Charvaka school primarily wanted to have good things happen in this lifetime. They did not, so therefore they did not take interest in the future lives, and so they only took interest in this lifetime. And so they're called they're called the hedonist school. And so the name in the Chinese is probably a translation of this. Basically means someone who are interested in this life. People who are interested in this lifetime. Now, in Tibetan, what's known is Gyangpempa in Tibetan, which is in Sanskrit, which is Lokayati school. And the reason why this is called this is because it has gone a long way. It's gone very far from the upstanding traditions of the world, so it is called the extreme of the world. Now, it is also sometimes said that the Charvaka who developed through the jhana and those who developed through intellection. So the ones who through the intellect. So the ones who develop their view through jhana say that there are past and future lives, but that there is no liberation. The ones who developed from intellect say that there's neither past nor future lives nor liberation. So, among these six, they also explain that it comes from a series of teachers, including the Ajita within this. There's also in the Samkhya it says that there's a text named Sri Jaya Rashibhadra. And so these are some names that are given by the Samkhya teachers. Now, what is the fundamental text of the Charvaka school? We don't have actually a complete text or a complete school of this. And so it's difficult for to say that there is we don't have any text left of the Charvaka school, so we can't point to any say that this is the fundamental view. But there are some that have been left that are found in fragments. For example, in Tibetan, we have Kamalashi's commentary on the Tattva Samgraha, which speaks about this. It speaks about this Devaguru, and it gives some of his positions. Likewise, in there are also some words from this from the Charvaka teacher in the auto commentary on the Entering the Middle Way. And so there is still also a Charvaka text in Sanskrit, but it's very difficult to say that that there is any root text of the Charvaka school. In any case, whether you're Buddhist or non-Buddhist, so whether you're non-Buddhist or Buddhist, everyone considered it to be the worst among the different views. The Buddhists say that it is the worst of the view, and the non-Buddhists also say it is the worst among the views. An example of how the non-Buddhists considered it the worst is that in the Compendium of All Views by Madhava Acharya, which we mentioned yesterday, he counts 16 different schools. And among these 16 schools, he considers the Charvaka to be furthest from the correct view. And some scholars also say that the Charvakas were probably not actually a philosophical school, because they're called the hedonists, and so for at that time, they're basically materialist traditions of Charvaka. And so probably what happened is there's several materialist traditions, and they're probably all given this by the name Charvaka. So there are some people who also state that. Now, the tenets of the Charvaka school are that primarily that aside from perception, there are no other valence of knowledge, such as inference. They do not accept them. Likewise, they say that the four elements of earth, water, fire, air truly exist, and that everything arises from the four elements. But they also say that the matter and mind arise from the same cause. They're the same thing. They also say that the world was produced by coincidence and luck, that it was not produced by any creator of the world or by any particular power. So basically, the Charvaka view is among the 62 so the Charvaka view collects all of the views, such as the views of no cause, denial of cause, the nihilist views, and so forth, of the described in the 62 views above, and combines them all into one. And so basically, it is like an extreme view. It is among the most extremist of extreme views. There's also a song written by the Charvakas themselves. It's their own song, and what it says in there is that they say it very nicely. At that time, actually, the Charvakas at that time there are many different views that appeared in school. There are many schools that appear in India, and the Charvakas didn't have any sort of order, any distinction saying I say this, or not this. They write with this, and they write their own. They would say their own things, and so at that time, there was no great development like today. There was no TV and no phone, and so no one had any work, and so they would think about things, and they'd have all these different things. They'd think up anything. They had this time, and so they're basically spending all the time looking for logic, and people would just say whatever they thought and say, I think this and I think that. And then they'd spend all their time debating, right? And so there are so many different views at that time, but at that time, the Charkha was like the worst of these views. It's recognized as like the worst view of that time. But at that time, the view that was the worst view at that time is actually now the view that most people are here. Most people in the world are actually exactly the Charvaka view. When I say that, when I read the words of the song, then you'll see that. Basically, most people in the world, in the society these days, the view that all that the philosophers consider the worst is actually the view that most people these days hold. So whether we're thinking about the improvement of our view or the evolution of our views or the devolution of our views, it's hard to say. If we look at it from the perspective of the philosophers of the past, if we think the way that we think about things, the way we act today, are actually signs of what they would have considered a wrong view. So what it says in this Charvaka song is this: there are no gods, they say. There's no ultimate aim or liberation. There's no liberation. There's no ultimate nature. There's no ultimate nature, they said. Likewise, there are no other worlds than this one, some other worlds, or the next lives are these delightful heavenly realms. They're nothing like that. There are no rituals. There's no karmic cause and effect, no sacrifices. Performing sacrifices and confessing the seeds and all that is just pointless. Performing sacrifices and confessing this, how did that happen? Is that people who don't have any courage and no skills, it's that they made them up in order to pass their days. When they're doing sacrifices, and they're sacrificing animals, they're doing a lot of very cruel things. But what they say is that so we're offering the gods to the animals and saying that they'll be reborn as gods, they say. If you actually think that, then you go sacrifice your, why aren't you going and killing your parents and putting them in the fire? Likewise, what they also say is that it's like in the days there was like they would offer food to the ancestors, their parents or grandparents and so forth, since they would have a ritual of burning the food for that. Saying that when you offer the burnt offering of the food, it's similar to a soft offering, that this fills their stomachs. They're no longer hungry. And the Charvaka say, well, that's no point to that. If this is going to fill the stomachs of your ancestors, your grandfathers, and your grandmothers, and so forth, then there's really no need when you go traveling to carry provisions on it. When you go say to your people, say to your family members before you go, just say, okay, you make some nice offerings for me and I'll go. Because if your ancestors can be filled, then if they do it for your point, if they have them do this smoke offering ritual for you, then your stomach will be filled too. Similarly, everyone makes so many offerings to the sacrifices to the gods in the heaven, and they think that the gods can be eaten by the gods in the heaven. And if that is true, then if one person lives on the top floor and the person on the lower floor makes an offering to the person on the top floor, well, look and see, can the person on the top floor actually eat it? It doesn't happen. It's just like superstition. It's like in actuality that can happen. In fact, that can't happen. Like these days, we say the coronavirus. You can't go outside. Like some people, when they live in multi-story buildings, the people on the top floors aren't allowed to go to the bottom floors. So if you have the food delivery people, if you order food, there's no need to order it. There's no need to bring it. They can just put it on the ground floor and offer it, and then it's fine. Everyone in the upper on the upper floors will get it. Another thing that Charvaka said is If while you're still alive, you need to do everything that's enjoyable. You should just have a good time. There's no next lifetime. And so if you're going to have a good time, you have to do it in this lifetime. You just do everything you want, do everything you think about. Whether you're going to enjoy it or not, you got to do it. And if you can borrow money from a friend, then you have to borrow it. And then eat as good food as you can, wear the best clothes you can, and do whatever you think of. And then once you're dead, and your corpse is buried underground, you aren't going to be able to give it back. Likewise, they say, there's no next life, they say. Someone dies and their consciousness then continues to go, right? People say this. They say there's no way this can happen. If the consciousness can go to another world, then why doesn't it come back for the sake of the family members who are left behind? If it can go there, if it's going to go to another, if it's able to go to the other world, next world, then why is it going to come back to see its friends and family? They say this is all made up. It's false. Likewise, for the sake of deceased people, you spend a lot and go to a lot of expense. You go spend a lot of money. There's no point to it. This is basically just the deception of the cruel Brahmins. Basically, it's the Brahmins are just trying to gather wealth for themselves. There's no other benefit. Likewise, you've got the Vedas, the authors of these are like all just terrible people. They're all bad gods. If they call them gods, they're like their spirits. They're bad gods, bad spirits. They're just written. They all got together and wrote them. It's basically they're all just performers. They're the same as our performers. So there's no point in it. And so further, reciting sutras and reciting mantras and reciting rituals is like pointless and meaningless. And so instead, it's better to just do what you enjoy doing. So if that way of thinking is actually very similar to the way many people think these days, people say, oh, forget your life. As long as, do whatever is good, as long as they can get some money. They want to get a car and a motorcycle and a house and everything else, fine. But who cares about the future lives? Whatever happens with liberation, whatever's going to happen the next world happens. There's probably no future lives, they say. So that's how they think, right? So this Charvaka view was in the Indian society at that time was considered extremely extreme, one that had really crossed the boundaries. But in many societies of the world these days, the way most people think is basically that. Generally, the people of those times who held that view probably had been in India for a very long time before. The reason we can say this is there's a story in the Mahabharata. What the Bharata says is that there was a demon who possessed a Brahmin. He made himself look, and he went to a king named Yudhen. This would be Yudhishthira. And he went to see King Yudhishthira. And when he returned from seeing them, he got what he wanted and he came back. And this Brahmin, who was an emanation of the view, said many things that gave people wrong views. And because he had spread so many wrong views, so at that time, the law at that time was that if you were a Brahmin who did this, then you would be executed. And so there was this story that at the end, he was executed at the end. Now, of course, this is just a story, but it's possible that there was a true event behind it. And if it were true, then it would be true that then we could say that there are people who did not believe in gods and didn't believe in anything in India from the ancient times, as this is described in the Mahabharata school. So that was a brief description of the Charvaka school. Now I'd like to speak about the Jain religion. Now, normally we call them the naked ascetics, but I don't think that's right because I will explain the reason later. So it's the Jain religion. The Jain religion appeared is under doubt. Researchers have different positions, and the researchers have so many different positions, but there are basically two. So one is that many scholars says that the Jain and the Buddhist religions began to spread at about the same time. So that's one position, that they arose around the same time. Now, there are some other scholars who say that the Jain religion was first arose when first Buddhism arose, and then the Jainism arose from within Buddhism. It became like it was derived from Buddhism. It became like it was originally a part of Buddhism. So it's like the Buddhism had appeared, and then that had changed and became the Jainism. And so basically, these are two different positions. Likewise, if you ask who is the founder of the Jain religion, again, there are two different positions among scholars. So many scholars say that the founder of the Jain religion is the Ningaranta Jatiputra mentioned in the Buddhist scriptures as one of the 6 non-Buddhist teachers. But if we explain it the way the Jain religion explains it themselves, they say that the original founder of the religion was Vardhamana Mahavira. And so he was the founder, this Vardhamana Mahavira. So this Vardhamana Mahavira is the image of him. And so he's very similar to the Buddha. So some people mistake the Jain teachers and the Buddha teachers. And they think that the Jain teacher is the Buddha, and so they mistake him because he wears similar robes and so forth. And so there are people who mistakenly identify him as the Buddha. So now Vardhamana, is very similar to the life story of our teacher, the Buddha. At the age of 29, he went on the road. You could say going out on the road, or going forth, you could say, and began to practice the path. And after 12 years, he spent 12 years practicing the path, and after 12 years, he achieved the level of a jin, or a victor who has been victorious over the afflictions. He achieved that station, and then he spent the latter 30 years of his life gathering many people and teaching teaching Dharma to people. And in this way, the Jain religion developed. Now, the religion in Sanskrit is called the Jain religion. And so Jain comes from the word for victor. So it basically means, as we say, because you're victorious over the afflictions, you're a victor. So they call the religion the Jain, or the victorious ones. Now, the reason why they're sometimes called the naked ascetics is that actually within the Jain religion, there are two different sects. Now, one of them was naked. And so the name was actually then given to, they were called the naked ones, and that name was given to the entire Jain religion in Tibetan. Now, the way it's described in the Buddhist scripture is that when Buddhism was first developed, there was the Nigranta Jatiputra teaching the Jain religion in the region of Vaishali. And at that time in Vaishali, the largest religion was the Jain religion. Now later, after Nikaranta Gyatiputra passed away, his students split into two sects. They fell into two different parts, and they were always criticizing each other and having just continual disputes amongst themselves. And so this topic is described in detail in the long discourses and also in the Pasadika, or the Sutra of the Freedom from Stains. And so this is written about in these two sutras. So as I just mentioned, after the teacher of Jainism, among his followers, there was a disagreement. So what the dispute arose, first there was a small dispute, but later they split into two completely separate sects. And this probably happened, when you look at it, probably around 200 years later, that it definitely divided into two sects. And so the way that this happened, the way the split into sects developed, was that there was the king Chandragupta. He was the first king of the Maurya dynasty, so Chandragupta. So during his reign in Magadha, there was a great famine in Magadha. And so it's such a great famine that at that time, there was one leader of the Jains who was named Bhadrabahu. So he and all of his students, and he took them all, and they went down to the region of Karnataka. So they went to the south of India. Because there was such a great famine, they went down to the south of India. Now the rest of the Jains continued to stay in Magadha. And they compiled all the scriptures, the Jain, and held a council and so forth. Now, after the famine was finished, then all the Jains who had gone down to the south of India, so that one group that was in it, they all returned. And when they came back, the two groups, the one that had been from Karnataka and from Magadha, when they reunited, there was a big difference between the two of them. And when they returned and saw each other, they saw that their robes completely didn't match. They had completely different clothing. And the difference in the clothing was that the sect in Magadha said that one should wear white robes. And the Karnataka said that one should stay naked. You shouldn't have any clothes at all, and you should live naked. And so then the question of was we going to wear clothes or not? Should you be nude or should you wear your clothes? And so that's where they had the dispute. And so the white card was called the white robe, which is Svetambara. And the group that said you should stay naked is called the Digambara. So they said that you should basically wear this cloth. If you say naked, it's not. So they say they wear the directions as their clothes, it said. And so the Digambara, those who wore the directions as their clothes, so what they said is that the teacher Nagaranta did not have a wife. But the Svetambara said that he had a wife, and not only that, he also had a daughter. And so there's these disputes, and also, unlike the Digambara, the Svetambara said that women can achieve liberation. And I think the Digambara did not explain it. And so there are many differences in their tenets. And they have many different explanations in their two different traditions. But these Svetambara and the Digambara do have some share root texts, which is in 50 volumes. And later, when it was all compiled, then the two sects then compiled the text individuals. So there's two different receptions of these two. Now, most of the Indian texts are most of the Jain schools are mainly half in Sanskrit and half in colloquial. Likewise, the Jains, they took many different ideas from Buddhism and incorporated them into the Jain religion. So it's like this, either the situation or the way it seems. So in generally, the Jain scriptures were or the time when the compilation of the Jain scriptures was completed, it was probably in the 5th century. So it's basically, that was the time when they're able to completely compile all of the scriptures. And so at that time, the Buddhism has spread very greatly. And so if we look at the times that there, you can see that there are a lot of similarities between the Buddhists and the Jains. And so it seems that the Jains probably took many different ideas from Buddhist texts, included and incorporated them into their own. Now, generally, the Jains texts, if you look at them, you'd think, well, this is like a type of Buddhism. And I think this is a branch of Buddhism. I think it's easy to mistake them. So the scriptures are very similar in that respect. But however, the Jain scriptures that are still extant, so the question is whether the current scriptures of the Jain school are actually the teachings of the teacher, because they were all compiled later. They're compiled over time later. And so it's difficult to say whether they're the actual teachings of the founder of the sect or the religion. It's because the scribes, so in terms of when we look at the scriptures that were compiled later, it's actually difficult to say what the original way the teacher, the Jain teacher taught. So all the scriptures are later. And so one main reason why there's difference between that, where they aren't able to get standard beliefs within the two sects, comes from that. Now, generally for the Orthodox schools, if you do not accept in terms of the Jain school does not accept the Veda school. So in that respect, then they're similar to the Buddhists in not accepting the Vedas. They're not an Orthodox schools. Whatever the Orthodox Hindu sects say, they have to accept the Veda schools. Likewise, in asserting that there's no creator of the world, Jain religion is also similar to Buddhism. When we say that saying that there's no creator of the world is saying that there's no creator, but it's not saying that there's no gods. It's not saying that there's no Brahma or so forth, but it's saying there's no all-powerful God who created the world. But if we look at it in terms of the philosophy, there are actually some great differences between the Buddhism and the Jains. The Buddhism basically doesn't have much connection with the Brahmanas, and it's a very separate religion. But the Jain does have many ideas that are similar with the Samkhya school. For example, the Samkhya says that there are the two constituents of the world, the primal nature and the Purusha itself. And so that there are these two. Similarly, the Jain religion says that there are two. Likewise, they also consider the ascetic practice to be extremely important. Within Buddhism, the ascetic practices are not explained to be very important or significant. So there's another difference there. And so in this way, when you look at the Jain religion itself, is different than the 6 Orthodox Hindu schools. The it's like a bridge that can make a connection between the Hindu and the Brahmana schools, because from one aspect, the Jains are accord with the Buddhism. From another perspective, they accord with the Hindu schools, and so for that reason, the Jain scriptures are like the bridge that creates a link in between the Buddhism and the history and the Hindu schools, and so in this way, they're very particular position. And so for this reason, it's a very special school within the different Indian religions and schools. Now, they also talk about the three jewels, or the three jewels. But when they talk about the three jewels, are not the same Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha that we speak about in Buddhism. What they say are the three jewels are right prajna, right faith, and right conduct. These are the three. So right prajna here means distinguishing what is from what isn't. It is the prajna that distinguishes what the nature is and what it is not. It's not the prajna of understanding the 5 different areas of knowledge, it's being able to distinguish what is the nature from what is not. Now, right faith means being complete and heartfelt belief in the teacher. And so having a great faith in the scripture, having no doubt at all, even in a single word of the scriptures. No, right conduct has 5 aspects. The first is nonviolence. Now, in the Jain religion, nonviolence is a main part of their practice. The nonviolence is they've come to a level where ordinary people probably couldn't practice it. So the giving up violence is a really important practice for them. For example, in many of Mahatma Gandhi's writings, he said that the view of nonviolence, he was a leader of environments, and what he says is that so his works quote many words of the Jain scriptures. And the reason is that the Jain have such a strong emphasis on nonviolence. And the second one is truth, speaking, not telling lies. The third is not stealing or giving up taking that which is not given. The fourth is chaste conduct, and brahmacharya or celibacy or chaste conduct. And the last one is called aparigraha, which means like not possessing anything. So you only have the things you need, but other than that, you don't wear leopard clothes, you don't enjoy sensory pleasures, you give them up. You give up all other things. And so these are the five aspects of right conduct that they teach. And so that's a very brief introduction to the Jain religion. So in this way, we've generally talked about the Vedas in general. We've talked about the Vedic philosophy. I've given a bit of an introduction to all of these. So from tomorrow, we'll be speaking about the topic of Buddhism. And so we only have 4 days to speak about the Buddhist school. And I'll say as much as I can in those 4 days, but I'm not going to rush through it. I'm going to take my time to go through the Buddhist tradition. If I try to rush through everything, thinking that I should get to secret mantra, then I think that would actually make an obstacle to actually teaching the topic of Buddhism well. So I'm not going to rush to try to speak about mantra, but instead take my time to speak about Buddhism. So from the day after tomorrow, I'll speak about when the Buddha is. So this is the biggest problem. What century was the Buddha alive in? This is not just a problem for Buddhism at all. This is the biggest complication in any of Indian history. Whenever you're studying Indian history, the dates are a big problem. And the problem is because the people of India didn't have any interest in recording dates or recording history. The Mahabharata is like sort of like a mixture of history and stories and myths and all mixed together. And if we look at it, is this a real story? It's difficult to say. So which aspect is real history? Which part is like a story of realization? Which is part of a myth? It's all difficult to distinguish. Also, the Buddhists had actually they were very skilled in poetry, and they wrote everything as life as real, as living. You read it, you feel like it's exciting and alive. They write it in this way, so when you read it, so I know what's true and false is really who can tell. So the most important, the most difficult, I think, for people researching Indian history is dates. So everyone's saying, oh, they have to just sigh. It's like they have to beat their heads with a hammer. No matter how many times you hit yourself on the head or sigh, there's no day, so you can't say anything. There's no other way but to just go and to look in the old histories. And so the states of our teacher, the Buddha, are not at all certain. There are many different positions. Even among our Tibetans, forget about others, only among us Tibetans, when we speak about the dates of the Buddha passing, there are 7 or 8 different positions. And the difference between them is some of them say that it's a few hundred years ago. I don't know if it's 1,000, but there are differences of hundreds of years between them. It's not just like 1 or 2, but it's like differences of centuries. All of these people are saying these are all well respected and well known. And people who have very well-known names in history. And so to say it's not that, it's difficult, of course. To say it is, that's also difficult. So the Buddha is one person. He only appeared at one time. It's impossible that he appeared in 2 or 3 different centuries. And so it's a difficult issue. But I'll speak about this tomorrow. So today I will leave it there today. Now, today in particular is the Sakya Trizin Rinpoche. It's his birthday. I've had some opportunities to receive empowerments and traditions from Sakya Trizin Rinpoche, and he's come to the Kaju Mulan and gave us all teachings and empowerments, and we had this good fortune. And so I'd like to take this opportunity today. I will recite a long life prayer to the Sakya Goma. And then as we recite it, we should think that we're reciting it for all the masters of all the teachings to live long, in particular for the Sakya Trizin. He's one of the great masters and scholars of the Tibetan tradition. And in historical terms, in terms of his activity, in all respects, he's a Lama who is really different than any other. And so if he lives long and his activity flourishes, then Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism and all sentient beings will increase and our merit will increase. And so we'll recite this now. So now please show the long life prayer.
不是前面中的白白也俺往跟给东日前面。萨贤公干这边常年间提前去给菩萨家。可愿给咱百多百位是我的所爱健康们对外之类。三别忘记给不打色万家外来来家园在吧。是那这位西巴的大给用水给把差别给人。本主罗三别怎么罗大顺把对也多些相爱密苏些。给给把多要没等有罗些。哪个是算的？嗯。我不是前面中的白白也俺往跟给东日之面，萨贤公干这边常年间提前去给菩萨家，去给人把多把月是或者说给我们的月之类。三别忘记给我打色我叫我来来给月这吧，新那这位西巴的大给用水给把这边给人，本主罗三别怎么罗打算把对也多些将我秘书。给把多有没定有罗些。不是前面中的白白也俺往跟给顿句前面。萨贤公干这边常年间提前去给菩萨家。可愿给人把的多白为是或者说给我们的为之类。三别忘给不打色我。叫我来来家园在吧，是那这位西巴的大给用水给把差别给人，本主罗三别怎么罗打算把对给多些相话秘书，给把多样面点有罗节。好了是。다들네 아주 남기 손주의 죽동 기한테 대해서 나이다. Go